Welcome to me
You
and
Doctor Who.
We were giggling a little bit before recording, but that's good. That means the vibe is on for today. Haley, how are you doing today? I know I asked you off call, but we're gonna ask again for the audience.
I'm doing good. I was listening to a really sad musical that I was telling Julia about, so I'm ready to watch what I'm guessing is going to be a really sad episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna issue our first bummer warning of, I think, the show. From what I recall of this episode, the monsters were not very memorable, but I feel like the character interaction was. I mean, I think we forgot to watch the preview again. There's always something I forget to do before I press record.
Me
but
too.
But you remember it, right?
Yeah, I remember there were chupacabras and Cthulhu's.
Yeah. They were like in the sky, and also there was like two of Rose or something.
And she's like, it's Father's Day. It's the day my dad dies.
My dad died.
He's gonna get hit by a car, I think, and she's gonna push him out of the way, which I'm assuming is gonna Life is Strange style cause meteorites to fall into the earth and we all explode.
There's gonna be explosions galore, and the beast will come and eat upon us all.
The beasts?
The beasts! Me and my partner have taken to saying, like, the beast! Because we like Over the Garden Wall, and it's very funny to us the way he says it. That is basically what I remember. I like, without saying too much about what actually happens, is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the character interactions of this episode is the highlight. And that I don't mind. I love character interactions. I think it seems to be par for the course that a really good episode of Doctor Who has some pretty crappy monsters, but some really good character interactions. That explore like the ethical and moral quandaries of like time travel, and it's like really good. I really like it. I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna try to be more consistent with announcing like the writers and directors of like each episode. So in the sense that the writer for this episode is Paul Cornell. This is his first episode on the show. I forgot on the Doctor Who wiki I could just like click on their names and just see what episodes they worked on, so I could just, be like, yeah, we have seen this person before. The director for this episode is Joe Ahern. Last time we saw his work, it was on Dalek, which I feel like is a good sign. Dalek was like a really good episode.
That it was.
I greatly enjoyed it. And of course, once again, we have Phil Collinson as our producer for this episode. Unless you have any more thoughts or like speculation on what happens, Haley.
You know what's funny is the musical I was talking about was called Alice by Heart. I didn't finish the soundtrack yet, but I already strongly recommend it. Great Alice in Wonderland adaptation for any fellow Wonderland girlies out there.
The Wonderheads.
Any Wonderheads like myself. And the song in particular I was really stuck on was called Your Shell of Grief. And I have a feeling that's going to be a very on-topic song for this episode in particular.
Listen, it's just a kind of song you're gonna have to play over and over while you contemplate this episode afterwards.
Okay.
I think my favorite thing I opened with when we joined call with each other was like, who's ready for some daddy issues?
I am.
All right, I think we just gotta get into it. I think we just gotta watch the episode now. All right, here we go. Trigger warning for suicide and gore misophonia, or whatever it's called when it's uncomfortable listening to someone getting eaten. Real thing that happened in the episode. Sorry about that. Hi everyone, welcome back. We're emotionally damaged. I'm very glad I issued the bummer warning, because I was like, does this really warrant it? I don't think I'm gonna cry on this episode, and lo and behold, I was like tearing up, because I'm a sucker for someone who never got to like be a kid around for a character who never got to be a kid around their parent, and then like seeing them as an adult and calling them mommy or daddy, and I'm like, oh god.
I have a suggestion as to how they could have made this episode worse.
Yeah.
So, I grew up watching Once Upon a Time, And anyone who's watched that knows how I felt going through the highs and lows of that
The
ridiculous
epic
but very
highs and
lovable.
lows of Once Upon a Time.
For real. Anyone who knows the basic premise, because this is right in the first season, fairy tale creatures and characters cursed to live in the real world, whatever, and Snow White and the prince don't get to see their daughter for a very, very long time until she's an adult. And there's a detail added in that I believe the actor playing the prince came up with, where whenever he hugs his daughter, even though she's an adult, he holds the back of her head as if she's still a baby.
Oh.
And I think about that a lot.
Oh.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh. God, this whole okay. So I think as predicted, I felt like the monsters in this episode were very weak, very very weak as a threat. But boy, howdy, is that not the focus of the episode?
Not at all.
Who gives a crap about these guys? I want to see, like, this girly hang out with her dad and doing all the things she wants to do with him. I can't remember the last time I cried as a result of a Doctor Who episode. It was probably, like, with, like, the 12th Doctor, back when I, like, was watching the series, like, when it was coming out live. But, like, sometimes I get bothered by spoilers because when I watch something for the first time and I don't see it coming, I feel like the emotional impact is a lot bigger, at least for me. I know you're a little bit different regarding that. But that's why I am, like, always so, like, no, you can't look at this, it's spoilers. No, you can't do this, it's spoilers. Because I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I feel like if I had known, like, some of the lines of this episode, it probably wouldn't hit me as hard. And there are some aspects I, like, completely forgot about. Like, I completely forgot, like, the way she talks to her dad. Billie Piper's performance this episode was mwah, mwah, like, absolute ace, S tier. And this episode really feels like she knows who Rose is as a character, and, like,
very true,
why she would do the things she wants to do. Haley, do you have any other opening thoughts before I, like, delve into, like, the little details of, like, the plot and stuff?
Yeah, I really, really liked this episode. I'm debating if this or Dalek was my favorite so far.
Yeah, I'm like hesitant to say, like, a favorite right now. Well, it's because I already know what some of my favorites. I think my favorite is probably the next episode or two. Like, I think those are gonna actually be, like, my favorite of the season. But Dalek and this episode are, like, probably gonna be high up there. I think I would probably, just personally, I would put Dalek a little bit higher because I felt like the character interactions and the threat level felt both intense.
That's valid.
I think in this episode, the threat level was these guys keep flying around and they are stopped by a glass window. And we keep saying that they're very threatening, but they're kind of just flying around and making scary noise. I mean, admittedly, they did eat people. Listen, I won't deny, they ate some people on screen and there were crunching and bone noises, so I won't deny them that, but, like, we didn't know them.
Who cares?
Sure, some people died, but, like, no one we knew.
Nobody important.
Well, I guess with opening thoughts out of the way, we can talk about what happened. I felt like the structure for this episode, right off the bat, started off, like, very different. Because the episode has already started, but we look at a flashback because it's being narrated by Rose. Which I think is interesting. It kind of gave it a bit of a different feel, at least for me, for the episode, because it talks about her talking about her dad off screen, and then it's like you get to see little Rose and young Jackie talking about her father, looking through, like, a photo album, and then that transitions to Rose and the Doctor mid-conversation of her asking him to go see if she could go be with her dad as he dies. And I don't know, I'm gonna say I liked it. I did like the way they switched things up, because I not to be like, oh, I was a film student. I wasn't a film student. I took a couple film classes, but I like the fact that it's, like, a bit non-linear. or the fact, at least, that we don't even have to see the beginning of Rose and the doctor's conversation. Like, this is definitely the kind of conversation they would have at some point. I don't know. I just really like it.
I like it too.
I just like it. What does Marge say in The Simpsons? She's like, oh, I just think they're neat.
That's what it is. Yeah, I just think they're neat.
I just think it was neat. The whole entire episode felt very like closed off. Like it felt like it was its own world, if that makes sense. I think as a result, it felt a little bit longer than it needed to be. Like there were a lot of lingering shots, especially of the monsters like flying around. I think in our recording of us watching, I was like, I'm getting a little bit sick of this same little musical sting playing over and over again. It was kind of annoying me because it was good at first, but then they kept doing it over and over. Because I think the highlight of this episode is the character interaction. So when you have a bit of a lackluster villain, but like really good character interaction, you're basically just like using the monster or villain or whatever as an excuse to like break the energy of scenes. So it's not just like one scene the entire episode. That's kind of what the monsters felt like to me, at least, that they weren't actual threats, they were just ways to like transition scenes from one to the other, which is like, you know what? You gotta do what you gotta do.
It's funny to think that Donkey from Shrek was able to do what they could not do.
Yeah. Rose is like narrating, it's like November of 1987. They keep saying Stuart and Sarah's name, I think because like it's a point of the episode that it's like, this is like a running theme with Doctor Who. I feel like I say this episode, this is a running theme with Doctor Who, that the Doctor doesn't view anyone as unimportant. So when these characters, Stuart and Sarah, are the ones getting married that day, later in the episode, you know, they express, you know, a lot of fear of like what's happening with like they're not called Reapers in the episode, but that's what the monster name is called. They're like Reapers because their tails look like scythes or whatever. Like, ooh, clever.
That's cool.
I thought it was cool. I just wish the design flowed a little bit more. Kind of looked like a very jumbled monster design. I do like the idea of it being a scythe, but I'm not quite sure I understand why a Reaper specifically, because the Doctor later refers to them as like bacteria within a time wound, trying to like heal it basically by destroying everything. If anything, that reminds me of like a white blood cell. I feel like maybe, at least to push that metaphor along, maybe should have been. He should have looked like that anime guy from, what is it, that anime you watched?
Cells at Work.
Cells at Work.
My favorite anime of all time.
That's what he should have looked like, eating people. But I think it's a good start of the episode because we get, like, Jackie speaking, like, so fondly of, what's her dad's name? It was, like, Pete, right?
It was Pete, yeah.
Pete, yeah. She's, like, speaking so fondly of Pete, and it's clear she, raised Rose with a very like idealistic version of her father. And I really like the theme of this episode, which seems to be like the dangers and like comforts of projecting your ideals onto a person. Like it's good to remember someone for like all the good aspects they have, but if that's all you remember them by, or at least think of them by, when you interact with them in person, like Rose does, and sees that, you know, her father was as flawed as any other person, and so was her mother, it's a bit disorienting, it's a bit of dissonance, and very upsetting. I keep jumping ahead, but, like, I just really want to talk about this episode. I was gonna say, like, at first, at the beginning of this episode, I really liked the way the Doctor was talking to Rose. I was like, alright, you've done some improvement, you're kind of talking to her like an equal, as opposed to, like, this thing you're carrying around. This little thing. Because he's, like, telling her the rules, and, like, you know, so you can do this, but we have to be very careful about it, and, like, letting her know. And then, of course, Rose is like, impulse save my dad, because she watches him die, kind of freezes up in sort of like a fight, flight, or freeze, and she freezes, doesn't do anything, and she's like, "Can I get a do-over?" And the doctor's like, "All right," and she kind of screws it. Okay, I'm good. I will say, so the past versions of them disappear, right? And I assume that that's part of like the whole time wound thing. They don't really address the fact that like, well, if we never existed to like, watch that happen, then we ourselves in the present time shouldn't exist either. I don't think they bring up that type of paradox, even though that's a very iconic paradox in time travel media.
Isn't it fun knowing that this is why time travel can't exist? Because every time travel story, no matter how close to perfect it is, will always have some kind of plot hole or paradox to it because of the nature of time travel.
Yeah, there's like it's crazy how many different types of time travel there are. I think the one that I find the most interesting is like faded time travel, if that makes sense, where like if you go back in time to see like a past self, you find out something that you do during your time travel adventures was something that had happened in the past that you basically had no explanation for at the time, but then you find out it was like because of you or something.
Yeah, those are always cool.
Yeah, and I think those are interesting because it's like, well, if we really wanted to change things, could you? Or is the act of you trying to change something what makes it happen in the first place? That sort of deals in with like fate and stuff like that, and I don't think that was. I think probably that's why they didn't include it, because it's like you delve into like aspects of like, oh, fate and destiny, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about projection of grief and ideals and mourning. Those are our topics for today, class, and that's what we'll be talking about.
Cry along with us, children.
But the funniest part I thought was when Rose does save her dad and he is like, "Oh yeah, is that your boyfriend over there?" It like cuts to the doctor with like this 1,000-yard stare. He looks like
he's a looker.
He's a looker. He looks like he's seen every horror imaginable, and I think he just looks insane. He's an insane man. And he kind of doesn't even say anything for a while because he lets. I think that's also an improvement of like how he acted in like earlier episodes where he kind of just skipped right towards like yelling at people whenever they messed up. He kind of like sat with his own thoughts for a second and let Rose do her thing to see if she like can. Almost like a parent. Actually, you know what? I don't like this. He like kind of talks to her like a parent in the sense that he's like waiting for her to like understand the consequences of her actions, and she refuses to admit to it, so he has to do it for her.
And it's funny because in our recording we were, or I at least was making that joke, and I didn't even really think of it like that, just subconsciously, because his face made me think of a parent like, all right, I'm gonna count to 5. Yeah. Starts busting out her middle name.
I don't even know her middle name. I'm sure it gets said at some point. Anyway, he pulls this, what's the word? He does get impatient with Rose again, and then, pulls the stupid ape line again. I was like, Doctor, I thought we were past this. Like, you used that phrase in episode 1. We didn't very like it. We didn't like it very much. And I think you need to stop doing it, especially as a direct insult to Rose specifically. They sort of have this argument that's like not a very healthy argument. It's a bit unhealthy the way they talk to each other sometimes. The power dynamic they have with each other, because he basically threatens to like leave her there. He's like, if you're gonna behave like this, I'm gonna take away the TARDIS key. Again, like a parent, like grounding her, but also basically saying, also, I'm gonna abandon you here. And she's like, fine, go, you're gonna be here anyway. And it feels like she's arguing with him like they're in like a bit of an unhealthy like relationship, and he's arguing with her like, she's a child, which is why I feel like, any sort of like romance at this point feels a little bit weird, because they very clearly have different, like, they view each other so differently, and they don't really treat their relationship the same way the other one does. If that makes sense. I don't know.
That's a very, no, I think that's an excellent observation. I hadn't really thought of it like that. I made a joke about this. I've been thinking about this a lot since we've been going through the show, and I wasn't sure if I should say this, because I know this can be a bit of a dangerous statement.
We're gonna have a hot take on me.drwho.com.
in fandom spaces, and I'll clarify exactly what I mean, is I was gonna say I really feel like I'm seeing them less as a couple and almost a little bit more as siblings, if anything, and I want to clarify. And live!
And live! Wait!
Wait. I don't mean that to say that you can't ship them or that I think you're weird for shipping. I'm not like, I'm not saying, oh, but they're sibling coded, so you're weird for shipping. No, because clearly I'm the weird one for interpreting it the other way around, because the show doesn't want me to.
Yeah, I think the show is very clearly saying, like, ooh, they could potentially be a romantic couple, and then both of us are like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, so nobody's like, Haley, are you saying that I'm problematic for shipping them? I'm not at all. You ship them to your heart's content.
Do whatever you
little
want.
Halehead.
They're both adults, technically.
As long as you consider yourself a Halehead rather than a Martian, you can do whatever.
No! Never mind.
Anyway.
You know what? Haley's a little hater, and you should ship Nine and Rose to the ends of the earth.
This is the last episode. I'm going to my trailer. I'm blowing up the
our
whole studio.
Our big fight, the thumbnail of our video.
Why we can't break up.
Our breaking point, why we have to stay together.
But you know what? That's how Nine and Rose are.
Yeah. Why we stay together forever, why we can't break up. We're breaking up.
We're getting divorced. But yeah, because, I think we've mentioned this already, that I'm an only child and you're the one with siblings, so you're more of an expert on this than I am. But I feel like they remind me of a depiction of siblings where they go so quickly from, like, oh, we're best friends, I'm so there for you, thank you for coming into my life, and then, I want to kill you, you're so fucking stupid!
I'll kill you! I will say, when you, mentioned that, later in the episode, I was like, you know what? I would excuse more of their interactions if they were more sibling-coded than romantic-coded. Because, that's kind of just how you talk to your siblings if you were in a situation of, I'm gonna leave you here. Fine, do it. You're just gonna stay over here anyway. Yeah, I'm going. It's just yeah, that's sibling.
It'd be kind of cute, honestly, if it's crazy. Just gonna say, it makes me realize how changing the dynamic really does completely alter, even if they're having the exact same interactions. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I find, the tone they're going for, dissonant, basically, because it's they're very clearly, I don't even think this is subtle anymore, trying to set them up as a bit romantic towards each other, but the way they're going about it just it kind of irks me a little bit, and again, it's just the power imbalance. I feel like he just, not that he knows more than her. I think they're both smart in their own ways, but clearly sometimes he holds his practical knowledge, just because he's literally lived centuries longer than her. He kind of holds that knowledge over her head sometimes. Well, especially in this conversation, he was I'm allowed to make changes to the past because I know what I'm doing. You don't. And she's oh, so it's better off if my dad were dead. And he's that's not what I'm saying. And then they have an argument, and I think maybe they were going for old married couple kind of vibe, but I
probably,
I don't know how much. I never really understood that joke. Maybe it's because I'm neurodivergent. I've never really understood that joke of oh, these two are bickering. They're arguing like an old married couple. And I never thought that was a very good reason for, because a lot of times a character will say that about a couple, and then the couple will have a moment of realization, what? I don't like you like that, or whatever. And it's oh my gosh. I think I guess the main example I think of is you haven't seen Stranger Things, have you?
The first season.
Okay, well, there are these two characters in season 3 or 4. Do you care about? I know you never care about spoilers, but do you care about spoilers for Stranger Things? I don't think you're ever gonna watch it.
I extra don't care for Stranger Things spoilers.
Okay, so the sheriff guy, Jim Hopper, and the mom of Will. So do you remember those two characters?
Yeah.
So When I was first watching this, I liked the idea of them getting together, mostly because they were like the two main adult characters and they had a good dynamic. So I was like, well, if they were romantic with each other, maybe that would be fun. When we get to like, I forget if it was season 3 or season 4, I don't know, the one where it's like they're at the mall and it's the 80s and also Hopper's like angry all the freaking time. Uh, he's angry all the time. That that made me mad. Like the fact that they made his character so angry and like pissy all the time. I can say that. um, but they sort of push this dynamic. This is when they start pushing this romantic dynamic between them, where like they could have feelings for each other, but it's the climax of this realization is during a moment where they're literally screaming at each other in anger during an argument, and someone and a character behind them who they're like, driving in their car with is going like, "Oh, you guys are bickering like a married couple. Why don't you admit you have feelings for each other?" And it's like the characters think it's out of place when he says that. I thought it was out of place when he said that.
Yeah.
And yet, at the end of the season, they're all lovey-dovey-eye for each other, and I've never really understood that. Like, what does yelling, like, there's like yelling at each other as like a bit like we're just like, "Oh, you stole my thing. Oh, I would never do such a thing," and then you're being like all sneaky about it. I'm using this is how me and my partner talk to each other, where it's like if we're gonna quote unquote argue, it's gonna be as a bit. It's never gonna be like legit arguing, and then us seeing that as like, yeah, that us genuinely arguing means we really like each other. So this is my TED talk of why I don't think arguing is a good reason for a couple to be together. It just means they're gonna argue more. If they're already arguing now, if they get together, they're just gonna argue more. I hate it. Sorry. Something came over me.
Did you get that out, boy?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, where were we? Yeah, he calls her a stupid ape. When he talks about what is like going on, he calls like this whole paradox situation. I wrote down he specifically said a vulnerable point, which I feel like is very similar to well, Haley already knows about this because I talked to this. I mean, and we watched an episode where they mentioned it, but like the doctor starts talking about like fixed points in time, like what's fixed and what's not fixed, and I think if we had the lingo of like later seasons that we do now, I feel like I guess this would be considered a fixed point in time because Rose changed it and then things started screwing up. But I think the difference might be was that the Ninth Doctor 9 was okay with Rose like changing history a little bit to be there for her dad because originally he died alone and no one was there to like, hold his hand and comfort him. So she wanted to be that person. And so the 9 was like, "Yeah, sure, we can do that." And so he was willing to change time, but I think when you create the paradox of like doing something that your past self didn't witness, and because they're witnessing it now, therefore they don't exist, or blah blah blah. It was a little confusing why their past versions disappeared, but whatever, I guess. I think that was the problem. Was not that it was a fixed point, but that they created a paradox, I guess. Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. Hee hee.
I think our brains will explode if we keep trying to rationalize it.
I'm trying to rationalize the paradox mostly because I feel like for future episodes I want to like compare and contrast how they handle paradoxes in later seasons, because they do some more paradox stuff, especially in like the 11th Doctor's run, Matt Smith. They do a lot of paradox stuff around then. And this is basically me being like, all right, how did they establish it in season 1? And I'm very curious how it's going to change in like later seasons. So if this is the basis of what a paradox is, I want to wrap my whole head around it. And clearly I am not very successful at that task. But no matter. Move on to the part of the episode where I think Pete starts driving Rose to the wedding because she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm in the wedding," or I'm going to the wedding, and he's like, "Oh, I'll give you a ride." And so they go, and then I thought this part was funny. There was like I assume it was like a 90s hip hop, or I guess it would have been late 80s, not 90s. Um, but it was like a British hip hop song, which I thought was funny because I've never heard British hip hop, and I was like, oh wow, this sounds a little goofy. Sorry to 90s British hip hop artists. I'm sure you're good.
Julia, that's our main demographic.
No, they're going to kill me. But yeah, Rose is like, that song's not supposed to come out for another few years. And then she gets on the phone, and it's like this recording of like, Watson, come here, I need you, which apparently is supposed to be like the first ever, recording of anything on a telephone or something, or the first phone call was that recording. I don't know my history. That they just kind of offhandedly mention it later in the episode. But I think to bring back to the theme of like, creating ideals of people in your head and like building it up until when you're faced with the reality of like what a person is like and like their full or at least to the way they're presenting themselves as, which in my opinion, everyone presents themselves different to everyone in their lives. I think there's different in not to get philosophical or whatever you would call this. I feel like, you know how you like present yourself differently based on like who you're around, what the situation calls for. There's not always like a true version of yourself that someone else can know. Only like you can know what like the true version of yourself is, and some people get existential over that. Sometimes I could get existential. I'm capable of existentialism.
I don't think even we know the full extent of ourselves, to be completely honest.
That is a good argument, because you know what that makes me think of? Not to tangent again, but I feel like what that is like the person I am in like my dreams, Like sometimes, because when I'm dreaming, I'm not exactly making choices that I would consciously make, because it feels like when I dream, I do like my instinctual choices, um, in the sense that I had a very unsettling dream once where I died, and my brain was like, all right, here are what your final words would like. My brain is like basically like, if you had final words, this is what they would be, and it's like what my instinctual like final words were, and that resonated with me so bad. I have never told anyone what those words were. They're not that crazy, but it feels very personal to me. So it's a crazy thing to know about yourself if you've ever had a dream where you die and you get to hear what your last words would be.
Meanwhile, I'm obsessive compulsive, and I've had my last words planned since I was 5.
I think about like what I might say, but I don't plan it out. I'm like, some people here.
Well, that's because you're not obsessive compulsive, so you don't know what it's like to plan everything. All the time, every day.
Every day and every second of the day. But you know what? You never know. Sometimes instinct might just take over and you might say something different. Who knows?
Oh, I hope I don't say something stupid like poop and farts.
Something stupid.
Like I love you.
But I don't know. I thought it was very interesting that Rose got to like witness her parents arguing, because I really liked it. Not that I like fighting, but I like that it doesn't portray these characters as like bad people. I think at worst it portrays Jackie as like very assumptuous. She jumps to conclusions very quickly. Like if she assumes something, she's immediately like, that's what's happening, and I'm not gonna let you explain yourself, which is not a very healthy behavior to do. Sorry, Jackie, I'm judging you a little bit, but it seems like some of her assumptions also have some logic to them. Like I feel like she's probably like a little bit insecure about herself because of how quickly she assumes her husband is cheating on her every time he like hangs out with a woman she perceives as like prettier than her. That's something you gotta work on in therapy, not yell at your husband about. But I don't want to say it was nostalgic because I have like divorced parents. All I'll say is that my parents were very considerate, trying not to argue in front of me and my siblings. And so, but I still appreciate when I watch scenes of like couples like arguing in a very realistic way. Like, not that like Jackie's in the, I mean, I feel like Jackie's more in the wrong in this situation, but also like Pete doesn't seem to want to fix it. He seems kind of like, yep, this is how it is, and that's just gonna how it's gonna be. She's just gonna yell at me, and that's what's gonna be for the rest of our marriage, if there is a marriage. Like, he seems already like a little bit checked out, and so I think that's like his fault in the conversation. But it doesn't feel like they're both completely in the wrong, and it was very, I guess, cathartic to see Rose like witnessing that, and that her parents aren't as perfect, or at least her dad isn't as perfect as she thought he was. Sad face.
Never meet your heroes.
Never meet your heroes. Never meet your dad.
Never meet your dad.
He'll get hit by a car and die.
It'll be your fault.
It'll be your fault, Rose. So at this point in the episode is when the Reapers start killing. They like, I think they literally start eating people, because what I thought was happening, because throughout the episode you get like little instances of like people disappearing. They do this a lot because, you know, you have this situation. I think when you're establishing a monster and its powers, you know, you show like the thing it does to a person, and it's like, oh, that's what they do. And in this episode it was like, oh, they make people disappear. Okay. And then they showed us that like over and over and over again. Like, they make this person disappear, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. It's like, we know, they make people disappear. But I thought they were just like teleporting them away. I didn't think they were like straight up eating people.
Yummy, yummy in my there's a party in my tummy.
But I guess that's why people were screaming earlier in the episode. I kind of just thought they got like booty blasted into like heaven or something. But the groom's dad like is like one of the people who gets like eaten, which is crazy. And they all hide. The doctor's like, we all gotta hide in the church, and they go hide in the church. And I think it's and at least I thought it was very funny that like these monsters have like claws and like scythes for tails, and they're stopped by like a stained glass window, one of like the most fragile things probably. Because they have like indents with like how like the art is made. I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't know how stained glass works, but it feels very breakable to me. Feels very easily enterable to me. But I think this is the point where like the doctor starts explaining what they actually are, and he describes them as like bacteria in the time wound that consume everything that's been affected, basically. Which I think is like, yeah, like I said, I think is an interesting concept for a monster. I still don't know why they look like Grim Reapers. I think it's just to be like, there seemed to be like a horror aspect they were trying to include in this episode, which I felt like it didn't really need. Like, there are a lot of horror stings and a lot of like screaming people, and of course, you know, them eating people with like bones cracking. I was like, ooh, I don't really like that sound. I think this is when the episode like really starts to get good, because this is the point where like, you know, in a story where all the characters are locked in a room and forced to interact with each other. So Rose and her father basically start talking to one another, and I like that he sort of comes to the conclusion on his own. I think that shows how, you know, he keeps being called a failure, especially by Jackie, for like having like inventions and ideas that don't always work out. But I feel like this is like, whether intentional or not, a sort of good display of his intelligence, of like showing, not telling, that he is a smart guy, or at least like it's a good descriptor of his character, that he's not a stupid guy, you know. When Rose is like, when he's like, so you called me dad, your friend here, there's monsters, so I'm willing to believe your friend, when he says there's like a time wound thing happening, are you like my daughter? And she's like, yeah. And there's this just lovely scene of like, they both get like really emotional and they hug each other, and Rose like starts calling him dad, and then just goes like, oh, my daddy, and I'm like, ah. Like, that part was like my eyes were watering. And I'm such a stickler for like that trope in like media of like just like an adult kid getting to like interact with their parent they never got to interact with. And another line that made me like very I thought was very cute was like when he realizes, she's his daughter, and he's like, well, now that I'm your dad, I can say that your boyfriend, I think he looks too old for you. And she like laughs, and I feel like that laugh really is like just a representation of like that's all she's ever wanted to hear from someone. Like, of course she hears that from her mom, but I think she's probably always imagined what her dad would be like. And I think when you imagine what a dad would be like, it's usually like someone who's like protective of you, and like, is kind to you. And it makes me emotional thinking about that.
I'm already emotional all the time every
Yeah.
day, but this makes me extra
This is
emotional.
like an extra spice of emotion. There's also a little a character earlier in the episode was like a little kid who's like friends and family disappeared on the playground.
Yeah.
And then he runs in and you hear Jackie off screen going like, Mickey, where are you? I'm like, Mickey. And I guarantee I 100% did not remember this part. I was like, oh my gosh.
We were flipping out.
It was so cute. Because I was like looking at the child actor, and I was like, I feel like I recognize this kid from somewhere, and he had a very familiar face, but I don't think. Yeah, it doesn't seem like he was in much of anything else except for Doctor Who. He has one credit on IMDb, and it's Young Mickey. So I guess I didn't recognize him from anywhere else, but I thought it was very cute that he included Mickey. It seems like they have like a bit of a crazy age difference then. I mean, I guess it's not too bad if she's like 19, but if Jackie knows him, that implies that they're childhood friends, potentially?
If they're right that she really is into the Doctor, clearly she likes older guys.
Clearly this is a pattern. She saw an older guy and she was like, bye, Mickey.
And then she's gonna see like a geriatric next time who's 7 million years old from the planet Krypton, and it's like, oh my god.
She sees a 12th Doctor and is like, humana. No shade to Peter Capaldi. Peter Capaldi has aged gracefully, in my opinion.
But you are old.
Yeah, you're old.
Unlike us, we're gonna be young and we're gonna live forever.
I'm gonna live forever! I think after this conversation, Rose and the Doctor sort of like get to interact again, and at this point, I don't want to say they say their apologies to each other, because the Doctor says sorry, and then he says, Rose, now you say sorry, and I'm
He like demands an apology from her like he's a king.
I think, like he's a king, like he's a lord. And,
like a Galvanic character.
Like, I can see why they thought that line would work, kind of. Like, I kind of get it's a bit of a quirky line, like, alright, now you say sorry, and she says sorry. Because, well, I think it's like he knew she was gonna say sorry, but for some reason he wanted to be the one to tell her to do it, which feels weird. Like, I'm not trying to imply that the Doctor's like a weird guy or like a bad guy. I think that the writers writing him have like a weird idea of what flirting is what I think is happening. After, when they have this conversation, he sort of like properly explains, like, when you should not ever, like, touch a past version of yourself. It doesn't seem to be the case of like, if you touch your past self, one of you will disappear. It's just that it will invite more of the Reaper monsters, I think. It makes them stronger when you do that, I guess, is what the episode says. But after that interaction, I think she goes and sits with her dad and the Doctor, because the Doctor kind of admits, like, I don't really know what to do, guys. This is like, welcome to Rose's world. She doesn't know what to do either. And there is like a moment where like Pete is trying to convince, well, Pete sort of realized that the reason Rose is here, because she was sort of dancing around the subject initially and sort of even lying to him about how involved he is in her life. And I think it was like such a sad thing that was like what made him realize that he was supposed to die this day, was that like, oh, I know who I am. I'm an unreliable guy, so you saying I was reliable is like very clearly I wasn't the one who interacted with you, and you're like, I don't know what actually happened, but you're lying. And it makes me so sad, like, to see this guy have such like a negative view of himself. Like he views himself as irresponsible and like to the point where he immediately assumes the worst when he catches like Rose in that lie. But also it's like such like a human thing to do because in the moment where he's saying like, "Oh, I'm unreliable and I'm not a great guy," like in the same breath he's like comforting Rose and being like an amazing father to her. And I think that truly is like really good writing because I think a lot of people are like that. I'm like that where like you say like horrible things about yourself, but in in the next moment you're doing like a genuinely kind or thoughtful thing, but you can't see that in yourself because you just see all like the negative parts. And I feel like that's for a character that's like just been introduced to us and for us to get attached to and eventually die. I think it was very well written. I really like this guy. I just think he's neat. But yeah, after they sort of have that interaction, like Jackie comes over and I think she starts to realize that like Rose might be like she's jumping to conclusions. She's like, "Did you have a kid when you were 12? Did you name our daughter Rose after this Rose here? Like, are you insane? Are you an insane person?" But she's like starting to realize, or at least started to think like this could potentially be like her daughter, and she hands she hands Rose to Rose. And even though baby Rose is covered in blankets like from head to toe and has like a little hat on and a little onesie, I guess that's enough to cause a paradox for some reason. Because the monsters get stronger, they get bigger, and they're able to break in and eat the doctor. They just
like straight up.
They burst in, chomp down, and he's gone for a significant amount of time. And basically, kick starts like this really sad scene of like Rose like not knowing what to do, but her father realizing what has to be done is he has to like correct the timeline and he has to like die the way he's supposed to die, the way time permits it. So he runs out and then he allows himself to be hit by the car, and then magically the doctor reappears. I think the world like the color saturation like increases a little bit because I think it was like a very gray moment because it was like gray and cloudy until he finished it. I don't want to keep saying kill himself over and over. That feels bad. I do like that Rose in the end is still able to do what she intended to do from the start, which is, to be a hand to hold while her father dies. Even if, there aren't any last words to exchange with each other. It's just, a comforting thought. And I think because this story is so centered on like the character relationships and it's kind of like very, like I said earlier, like solid and kind of closed off, when that happens, the story basically is over and the episode almost like immediately ends after that. After like, 9 like comforting Rose by like holding her hand. Like that's like I think of their relationship, I do really like how often he is like ready to like physically like hold her hand when she needs comforting.
Yeah.
In that aspect, you done good, doctor. Kind of the way you talk to her though, you need work. But yeah, that's kind of the end of the episode. Do you have any like closing thoughts before we go into trivia?
Do we do ratings before or after trivia? I can never remember.
I think it's after. It's like
after.
It's like the last thing. It's like the very last thing we do.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have any closing thoughts. Just overall, very good episode. I liked it even more than I expected to.
It was basically what I expected. Like a lot of not the greatest monsters, but still a really really good relationship stuff. I said this while we were off call. I felt like there wasn't too much interesting trivia for this episode that I could get from the wiki, mostly because a lot of it was just like, we wanted to do this aspect of the episode this way, but we couldn't, so we did it like how it is in the episode. And it's, wow. Interesting.
Wow.
I'm enriched. But one of the main trivia points that I feel like is fun to mention is that Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper, 9 and Rose respectively, named this as their favorite episode, which I'm surprised they're like synced up on that aspect.
That's cute.
So that this is peak for them. And you know what? Not a bad peak to have. A secondary trivia point I have is that Simon Pegg from the previous episode was originally cast to be Pete Tyler, but because of scheduling conflicts, he chose the editor in The Long Game from the last episode. And I'm not sure how I would have felt about Simon Pegg being Rose's dad. I kind of feel like that might have taken me out of it because he's like a recognizable actor. I kind of like the fact that, as far as I know, I should say his name. I should say his name. Sean Dingwall. Oh, an unfortunate last name. I don't want to laugh at the man. He did a wonderful job this episode, but I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else because I don't watch too much British media outside of, what was designated for me to watch back in like 2013 Tumblr. So I kind of like that aspect, and I thought, he really gave his A game for this episode. Just a fun behind the scenes factoid is because this episode takes place in the 1980s, apparently cast and crew brought in like photographs of themselves for the 80s just as like, examples for like clothing and attire. They had like peach dresses and like big hair, but apparently incorporated, but these elements were not meant to be distracting. But like, I felt like they could have gone bigger,
I agree, honestly.
It didn't super feel like the 80s to me, aside from like maybe Jackie's outfit, but also I'm not super familiar with, the trends of the 80s within like England or however Britain. I don't know the difference between the two. Like I think, we America and like Britain probably, aligned with a lot of trends. I'm assuming like big hair and like bold colors was like a big aspect of the 80s, kind of like in a lot of like Western countries. I'm saying that like it's not a fact. I have not done research on this. You know what? They could have gone bigger. I'm gonna say it. The hair could have been bigger. All the ladies' hairs could have been bigger. My mom's hair was way bigger than these ladies' hairs. I've seen pictures.
Bigger than all their hairs, every individual hair.
Yeah, you gotta go puffier, you gotta go frizzier, like, that's what the 80s is all about, baby. But I understand it was a formal event, I suppose they had to tone it down.
This is a fancy party.
But another aspect of the episode is that apparently Russell T Davies and Paul Cornell, who is the writer of the episode, they debated on whether it should have been Rose's plan all along from, I'm assuming, the beginning of the season, to save her father. So this is left ambiguous in the episode, and it says that Billie Piper felt that it did not occur to Rose until after she began traveling. I'm actually curious if you have, like, a thought to, like, do you think it's more likely she, like, the moment she found out, like, it was a time machine, she was like, oh, at some point I'm gonna ask the doctor to, like, go see my dad, or maybe this was, like, a more of a spur of the moment kind of thing, because the episode opens, like, mid-conversation, we don't really know what prompted the conversation for Rose to go up to the doctor and be like, can we go see my dad?
I was kind of also under the impression that she probably just leaped in like, ooh, a time machine, I want to go travel through time. And then probably a little bit after was like, oh, wait, this is a time machine. That means I can go save my dad, which I imagine was probably a very, like...
The implications.
Intimidating as well as exciting implication, because I'm very much... as the designated Rose of this duo, I'm putting myself in her flower petal shoes and thinking, the way I would think. And that's how I think I would think. And, I can think of some people that I've lost that I would love to see again and that I would love to maybe even attempt to save. But I don't think it would have been my immediate thought, given, like if it was... I don't know, maybe if she was more depressed, like if she had been thinking about her dad when the doctor first arrived, or if it was the anniversary of the loss, like if there was something to have it very fresh on her mind, then maybe I would think that. But she seemed very happy to be like, yay, yippee, time machine!
I think for me, I feel like the way Rose thinks about her dad is like, it's just like a factoid of her life, that her dad died when she was young, she never knew him, it was a sad event, but that's just kind of how, a part of her life that's always been like that. Like, she's never remembered a time before, like, when she did have a dad. So it just feels like that's how it's, like, always meant to be. So when you enter a situation where you could have the opportunity to get that, it's not the first thing you think of, because in your brain subconsciously you're like, oh, I can't change that at all no matter what. So I feel, yeah, more along the lines of like, time travel sounds really cool, and then you do a few adventures and you're like, this is like real time travel. I could like do things.
Yeah, I feel like you gotta test the waters a bit with Charles Dickens and the farting aliens, and then you're like, okay, now's the time.
Now's the time. We gotta unleash hell.
What's next, trivia man?
So I just thought this was like a nice, more of like, I guess less interesting, more of like, nice and thought provoking, is that the writer Paul Cornell stated that Pete Tyler is based off his own father, who attempted many different jobs and schemes before eventually finding success running a betting shop. But apparently Pete's line of, quote, "I'm your dad, it's my job for it to be my fault," end quote, is taken from something Cornell's father once said to him, which I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's definitely something a parent says to their child, and it's like, gosh, that line really hit hard also, as like, because again, this is like him saying over and over, I don't take responsibility, that's not the kind of person I am, and then going, this is me taking responsibility, it's my fault, and because I'm your dad, I'm willing to bear that responsibility. It's just a very nice written character, Pete is.
I always loved characters named Pete.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay, so I included this because I was like, I don't remember this aspect of the episode, but if it comes up and I deem it funny enough, I guess I'll include it in the trivia. So this is copy and pasted from the wiki. Quote unquote, Rick rolling is a popular meme in which someone is led to unintentionally witness the song Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley in a Switch and Bait, which originated a couple of years after the episode's recording. So Doctor Who older than the Rickroll. I mean, obviously, but like Doctor Who knew Who older than the Rickroll, which I thought was really funny because, like, yeah, the moment that song started playing, we were like, huh.
I love the idea that that's the new, like, the best thing since sliced bread is like, this is the best thing since the Rickroll.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, I don't really have many more trivia points. Just cause again, I think, not that this was like a low budget episode. I'm sure a lot of budget went to those CGI Reapers, which I still don't, you know what, I'm gonna say it, I don't care for them. You know what? I don't really like them, actually. Not at all.
How could you?
Sorry, not sorry. Drag me on twitter.com. Whatever.
Are you trying to suggest that this show has lackluster CGI?
No. Listen, the Doctor Who I know has CGI on the level of Marvel movies, of modern day Marvel movies, and I will expect no less from season 1 of Doctor Who, or any season beyond that, for that matter. Well, yeah, I think that's kind of all I got.
I think that's all I've got as well.
Trivia-wise, Haley, I think it's the time of the episode. What rating shall you give this episode?
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna come up with super funny ones this week, considering what a serious episode this is. All I've really got in me is 8.5 extremely purple houses out of 10.
Oh my gosh. I think I said in the recording, this is like just a mini tangent, I swear. In an old apartment me and my partner lived in, it was like a very like standard apartment with like white walls and like, muddy colored floors or whatever. One day management just out of nowhere decided to like paint all the walls and doors and stairs this bright purple color, and it's like the exact same shade as it was at like Pete Tyler's house or wherever he and Rose were hanging out at. And I was just like, oh my gosh, when you see that in person, it is just so jarring on the eyes. It's ridiculous. I think I am you're right, this is too sad. I am going to rate this episode, I think I have it, but I'm trying to think of what number I'm going to give it, because I don't want it to be too low, but the monsters really bring it down for me. I gotta be honest with you. I'm going to be nice. I'm finding it. I'm going to give it 7 out of 10 humans eaten alive by Reaper monsters that should have been bacteria coated. And that's my rating for the episode. I'm extremely excited for the next episode because it's a two-part episode. It is not a two-farter, just a regular old two-parter.
No!
But I will say this two-parter is something else and introduces a lot of iconic like stuff in Doctor Who that will be referenced for seasons to come, and I greatly look forward to it.
I'm excited.
But we'll talk about our impressions on that in the next episode. In this episode is where, well, this part, we have to say goodbye to you.
But I don't want to say goodbye. Can't we sleep over at their house?
No, their parents said we can't because they're very picky about, like, who, like, because they know you don't take off your shoes when you enter the house, so they said you're not allowed.
During Pride Month?
This is infringement on my rights.
Which I would like to add, we're not recording this during Pride Month. Not sure if it's gonna come out during Pride Month either.
It might. You know what? I actually don't know.
Could we save this one for, like, December, so that's really fun?
Yeah, you know what? We're gonna hold off
skip it?
this episode specifically and release it as our Christmas special. I hope you guys enjoy. Merry Christmas, and to all a good night. Is that what that is?
Happy Hanukkah.
Is that what Santa says?
I think so.
Alright, good.
I mean, I don't know.
Goodbye, everyone.
I don't know the guy.
We have to stop now. Goodbye.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho. Hey guys, thank you for listening to our show. This was created by me, Julia, and Haley Doherty. The cover art and the thumbnails were illustrated by the two of us and edited by me. Episodes edited by me and social medias run by Haley. The theme song and other sound effects are by half.cool. You can find us on Instagram at me_you_and_Doctor_Who, on Twitter at me_you_and_dw, and on TikTok at me_you_and_Doctor_Who. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thank you for listening. Bye!